They're talking about the largest mass shooting in the history of the United States.
This is a crazed lunatic.
My brother just killed 58 people. My dad was on the 10 most wanted FBI list. We're not normal people. Steve gambled $1.6 million at the Mandalay in the week before he did this. He was really angry with the gaming industry.
What you saw was an excerpt from the trailer of Money Machine, upcoming documentary delving into that horrific shooting. And we are very lucky to be joined by the director of Money Machine, Ramsey Dennison, joins us on the Damage Report now.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you here. That was quite a trailer. I'm very glad that you can come on to talk about your documentary, because I'm going to be completely honest with you. It's been several years now since the shooting, and some of even the developments that, if people go and watch the full trailer, you reveal a bit there, came enough after the shooting that even me being a part of the media, I didn't see. There's a lot that many people still don't know about this shooting, and so I sort of want to start there. When you initially decided to have this be your follow-up, you'd previously done another documentary, you chose this. What was it about it that piqued your interest initially?
Well, I'd spent a lot of time in Las Vegas. As you said, my previous movie, What Happened in Vegas, was also from that movie. That movie made a lot of noise in Las Vegas. It won some awards and really got out there and was well known, got a lot of press. So because of that, I came into contact with a lot of retired law enforcement officers, former LVMPD sergeants and lieutenants, who admired what I was doing by pointing out corruption in the department. Some of these people, the reason they had left the department was because they thought the leadership was corrupt. And so they saw my movie, What Happened in Vegas, and I started getting messages. I thought just the opposite would happen. I thought these people were gonna bully me and, former cops, because the movie was pointing out corruption. But what happened instead is that these people became friends. And I'm talking about several retired former LVMPD sergeants, lieutenants, some of whom are in the film. And so I developed a relationship with them, and to this day, I still call them friends, good friends. And so after 1 October happened, I started getting phone calls from these guys. And they were telling me, and this is coming straight from the department that they were still well connected to. They talk to people who were, so they still have many friends in the department. And they were telling me that a lot that was going on with 1 October was not how it was being presented, that there was a lot of things being left out. And one of the reasons for that was that Sheriff Joe Lombardo had an election coming up. And, this is an election year, and this is an international event. It was one of the biggest stories of the year. And they couldn't have some of the LVMPD incompetence come out on a national stage. I mean, it had been, the previous shooting where there had been an officer who was exposed for being a coward, and I think it was either the Texas shooting or the Florida shooting.
I think it was Stoneman Douglas, I believe.
Yeah. They got horrible publicity for that, and so one of the things that Sheriff Joe Lombardo attempted to cover up, that I'd heard directly from the department, was the fact that Officer Cordell Hendricks, on the night of 1 October, was actually in position to do something about the shooting. And instead of doing that, he sat in the hallway like a little baby shaking. And body cam footage emerged of that later. But this was way later, so it wouldn't hurt. Yeah.
That's one of the most fascinating things, is that I don't remember that footage coming out, because the gap was so significant between the actual event. And we've seen this sort of thing before, where body camera footage, which could have been released almost immediately, like in Chicago, we had that as well. And so this isn't just a story of a horrific, tragic act of mass violence. This is really about the context of money, political considerations, and how that interfered with people understanding the event, right?
Very perceptive take on it. Whereas some documentaries might be exclusively about a mass shooting, this is about money and the mass shooting. And it's about how Vegas, which is a money machine, had to make this go away as fast as possible. And it's about the people who helped them do that, the LVMPD, and how the police department and MGM Resorts International worked together to not only prevent information coming out that exposed the LVMPD's incompetence that night, but also MGM's liability in all this. That's the other big thing. MGM's the most powerful corporation in Nevada. They're the largest employer. And the bottom line is Stephen Paddock was able to get over 20 guns up there. And the MGM Resorts International had over 200 cameras out that night, surveillance cameras. And most people don't know this, and that's not an accident. You're talking about a shooting where 58 people died, hundreds were injured. This settlement should have gone into the billions. And and I believe that if the LVMPD and the MGM hadn't worked together to prevent information from coming out, that it would have been, the settlement would have been a lot higher than it was. And the truth is, MGM had far more culpability in this than they wanted the public to know. And they used their power and money, and they used a corrupt sheriff on a corrupt police department to help them do that.
In a lot of cases where cities are the site of a horrific attack like this, you'll have some sort of community campaign of solidarity and trying to recover after a horrific event. And obviously in this case, you had that. The hashtag Vegas Strong was this big movement. So to tell me about that.
Vegas Strong was a con. And it was a con because they rolled it out almost immediately. I mean, they had it ready the next day. And you had a guy who was running for governor, Steve Sisolak, kind of became the face of Vegas Strong. And if you watch the press conferences, you'll see, it's very odd actually. You'll see this guy in the background, Steve Sisolak. He wasn't governor yet, but he used this to help become governor. So Vegas Strong became like a way for him to get his face on TV, to get him, international events. Worldwide publicity doesn't come along very often, and he used this event to get that. And the shady part of this, it would be one thing if that money went to the victims in a timely manner, but as Money Machine reveals, during the first 5 months, less than $20,000 of the over 10 million raised actually made its way to the victims. Okay, so the thing to understand is when people are injured, they need money now. I mean, their mortgages due now, their car payments due now, they got to have groceries for their kids now, and they didn't care about it. What Steve Sisolak and Vegas Strong cared about was getting FaceTime. And this guy, who is sadly now the governor, was too busy jumping in front of cameras, getting his face on national television to actually make sure that those funds made their way to the people who needed them. And I've talked to people in tears who were there that night, who have lost their cars, because they couldn't pay, just harrowing stories. And in my opinion, that shouldn't have happened. It really should have been about the victims. And Vegas Strong just kind of became a con. It's a glib con, like to make the country feel, and it was just Vegas doing what Vegas does best, putting a false face on something that's really about greed. I mean, Vegas exists to take your money, and Vegas Strong was another con perpetrated on the American public. And even to this day, there are not really solid records on how that money was distributed. But one thing's very clear: Steve Sissy Quack, now the governor, and yes, I called him Sissy Quack, that he used Vegas Strong to become the governor. And the victims of the mass shooting should be outraged at how this grandstanding, glad-handing politician used them and then turned their back.
Yeah, I'm curious, based on what you learned about the amount of power that some of these companies have in the area, and the sort of the rush to at least get back to normal or make people think that you're safe, you can get back to normal. I'm curious, in the past couple of months of the pandemic, the mayor of Las Vegas very early on announced that they would be reopening, had a few very bizarre interviews to that effect. It is now reopened, despite the concerns that having people fly in and fly out, all around the country could be dangerous. Does it really surprise you at all the way that Las Vegas has tried to get back to normal before it really seems like it's safe, considering what you've learned?
No, that's not surprising. But what is surprising is that a mayor with an IQ of 2 could actually run a city, even one is like Las Vegas. And I think when you saw that interview with Carolyn Goodman, you saw a very dumb individual who cares about one thing: money, and protecting the people who put her in there. And that's what, it's a very odd interview. It's just like, okay, just get people back, get them on the machines. Who cares if they get COVID and take it back to Kansas City or Baltimore or Detroit and spread it around the country and make the problem 7 or 8 times worse? Because money, cash. And that's what that's the one thing that the mayor with a 2 IQ understands is money and cash. And actually, just yesterday, I saw an article that a lot of Vegas is actually getting ready to shut down again.
Really?
Because I think there are other states who believe that they've handled the situation so carelessly that if you try to fly into, I think I saw an article about Illinois, like if you try to fly, like there are certain states that are on a list where you have to be quarantined before you enter the state. So there was obviously a big rush in Nevada to like open up the casinos and get the money machine going again. And it appears that it might have been premature because just yesterday I saw an article about how it might be shutting back down.
Wow,
so
that's amazing. And again, lives on the line, like in the documentary. Money Machine, Director Ramsey Dennison, thank you so much for joining us today on the show.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.